Today, my colleague Michelle Temple and I are going to be talking about scale construction, a most fundamental tool from Chapter 10 of Research Design in Counseling. Our objectives today are to begin the integration of spiritual principles into counseling research scale construction. We're going to identify the who, what, why, how of scale construction, bust the 7 myths, and learn the 9 steps of scale construction. On this slide, there's 3 translations of Nehemiah 8:8. And of course, these are all from the Bible, which is one of the most translated books in the world. So interestingly, as you look these over, see how the translations give the sense of this particular scripture and how they speak to you as the reader in how easy they are to comprehend, how they aid you in living as the Bible describes, and what it illuminates for you in particular. So consider this metaphor of translating the Bible into different versions to reach diverse samples of readers, and integrate that into our topic today of scale construction. You may be already familiar with some of these commonly known scales, such as the smiley face, strongly disagree to strongly agree. We also see scales such as the MMPI that are used in counseling and psychology research, which is the one that's displayed on the bottom right of the screen. So what exactly is a scale? A scale is a collection of items combined into a composite score and intended to reveal levels of theoretical variables, not readily observable by direct means. So scales are critical to counseling psychology research. They promote the development of psychometrically sound ways of assessing a new, or in some cases existing, construct relevant to the counseling profession. Strong science is built on strong measures of psychological constructs. So why create a scale? Eugene Peterson notes in his text, Eat This Book, he says about the Message translation, "I just wanted them to hear it in the way that I heard it, the way so many men and women through our Christian centuries have heard it and found themselves free by and for God." So essentially, we create a scale to let the users hear the construct in the way that researchers hear it as well. If our charge then is to carefully construct a scale, we must first consider the how-nots to do in creating one. Let's take a look at the 7 myths of scale construction according to Hebner. Our first myth is that it's fast. Actually, item construction isn't linear. It is subject to revision, and it's not uncommon for it to take 6 months to a few years. In Peterson's book, he notes a legend that it took 72 elders 72 days to translate the Bible into Greek. And his own personal experience was that it took about 10 years of very careful translation for the message to emerge. Number 2, no literature review is required. Reviews are actually crucial as they provide the solid grounding of the construct and a wealth of information from previous research findings. Number 3, convenience sample is all you need. Not so much. If a researcher simply uses the population that's around him or her without consideration of the study purposes and outcomes, it can skew the data. So, for example, a 1979 study of the prevalence of mental illness in prison population, it's affected the way that people perceive this for years. 33 male prisoners were selected and interviewed by a psychiatrist using an instrument called the Psychiatric Status Scale. Of those interviewed, 3% were diagnosed as having a mental disorder. So the main issue with this is that it came from a convenience sample, and a very small one at that. Very low number of participants. Female prisoners weren't included. And the determination of mental illness from a survey in one prison in one state can't really be extrapolated to the whole country the way that it was. So it's perhaps unsurprising that the estimate of prevalence of mental disorder in this study, it didn't mesh with a recent systematic review examining studies over a 40-year period, which actually found that 14% of prisoners had a diagnosed psychiatric disorder instead of just 3%. Our fourth myth is that factor analysis is enough. Factor analysis, that's where we take a mass of data and we shrink it into a smaller data set that's more manageable. It's certainly required, but not enough. We also need convergent and discriminant validity estimates. So, for example, when a new scale designed to measure an individual's level of depression is developed, it's an imperative step to examine convergent validity estimates by including a more widely used measure of depression, such as the Beck Depression Inventory. Number 5, Western testing isn't enough. Scales developed in one culture should not be used across different cultural contexts without acquiring additional data. Number 6, our myth that literal translation ensures linguistic and cultural equivalence. So we do want to conduct appropriate translation and back translations, but we also need to seek consultation with cultural insiders about how these items would be interpreted by people from the target culture. Words, for example, self-esteem, they may not have a direct translation, and sentence structure and grammar can also affect item interpretation. Our structural elements are not necessarily universal across cultures. So, given its popularity of the Likert scale, we may tend to believe that this response system can be universally used. It's an ordinal scale, right? What's wrong with numbers? How can that be mistranslated? However, literature suggests, for example, that some East Asians tend to frequently endorse the middle or center points of the scale. This tendency might reflect Asians' avoidance of being extreme in their responses. So therefore, with this population, it's difficult to interpret results when the mean response is on a 3 or a 5-point scale. So in that case, we may consider using more of an even number, a 4 or 6-point scale, and that would be a way to eliminate the option to pick the middle point. Now I'm going to turn over to Michelle, the 9 steps of scale construction.
Thanks, Michelle. There are 9 steps to scale construction described by Heppner et al. I will provide a brief overview of each step. The first step of scale construction involves identifying the construct of interest. These 4 questions warrant an answer from researchers who desire to define and describe a construct. To begin, researchers identify the psychometric need for the scale and relevance of the scale to the specific population. This step serves as the researcher's opportunity to learn from colleagues about the usefulness of the scale and the accuracy of the definition. The second step is to conduct a thorough literature review to explore the complexity of the topic and refine the conceptualization of the construct of interest. Researchers can use these questions to guide and evaluate literature. The findings from the literature review aid researchers in their understanding and translating of the construct into scale items. Step 3 of the process is to generate items, indicators, and response formats. Similar to the readers who gave the sense in Nehemiah 8:8, researchers create scale items so that the target population can understand the scale, and researchers, practitioners can interpret the scale. There are some baseline expectations for scale constructed listed here, as well as some suggestions from scholars in the field to create scales that are clear and not ambiguous. Step 4, described by Hepner et al., reminds researchers that reading is a form of translation. Step 4 strives to enhance construct validity of the scale, where the scale measures what it purports to measure, by consulting with content experts to improve content validity through content analysis, engaging participants as participants through pilot testing, and then participants as experts to gain feedback on questions or identify concerns about the scale, including the format of responses, such as rating scales, Likert scales, and response choices. Step 5, sampling and data collection. Using a sample that is representative of the people of interest is key to scale development. Researchers are advised to implement scale distribution methods to yield data from the largest number of participants who are in the population of interest. This also helps to ensure there is an acceptable and appropriate number of participants in the sample to conduct statistical analyses necessary to finalize and optimize the scale. Step 6 emphasizes the importance of translation. In counseling research, we are seeking linguistically and culturally relevant translations, not necessarily literal, because every language is different. Typically, in psychometry, it is the meaning the word conveys that is most important. Step 7, finalizing items and optimizing scale length. Factor analysis is a set of statistical procedures for theory and instrument development and assessment. Two types of factor analyses are exploratory and confirmatory. Exploratory factor analysis is usually performed in the early stages of research as a tool for consolidating variables, scale items, and generating hypotheses about underlying processes. In exploratory factor analysis, researchers seek to describe and summarize data by grouping variables that are correlated. The variables themselves may or may not have been chosen with potential underlying processes in mind. Scale items are often deleted, leaving only those that strongly correlate with the factors identified in the exploratory factor analysis. The scale is then ready for validation or testing for psychometric properties of the scale. Confirmatory factor analysis is a sophisticated statistical technique used in the advanced stages of the research process to test a theory about carefully selected latent processes. The scale is administered to another population to assess construct validity on the established instrument. The purpose of this testing on the scale is to validate the initial factor structure found through the exploratory factor analysis. The 8th step of scale construction involves testing the psychometric properties of the scale. Reliability estimates provide the researcher with information about the degree of the homogeneity or internal consistency among the set of items. Cronbach's alpha desired magnitude is typically 0.7 or higher. Test-retest reliability coefficient informs researchers about the stability of the scale over time. The recommended period between the pre and post test is at least 2 weeks, but the preferred lapse of time is 1 month. Estimates of validity, usually convergent and discriminant, are also conducted as part of the scale construction process. Convergent or concurrent validity examines the correlation coefficients of the new scale on an established scale and an established scale with the hypothesis of moderate to high correlations will be found between the two scales. Estimates of discriminant validity test the correlation coefficients of the new scale and an established scale, with the hypothesis of no to low correlations will be found between the scales. And finally, a possible step to scale construction involves the newest approach to evaluating scale items known as item response theory. Typically, IRT is used on achievement and aptitude tests such as the SAT and GRE. In counseling research, it is often used to further refine scales after they have been developed through exploratory and confirmatory factor analysis. We end our video with a quick reference guide of what, who, why, how nots, and hows of scale construction. Thank you.